Many of you have probably heard me quote on a number, on a number of occasions, of course, the infamous brain of Brexit himself, aka Daniel Hannan, or Lord Hannan as he is now, rewarded for his championing of Brexit. And you, of course, heard me say those immortal words that he muttered so many times. Only a fool talks about leaving the single market. And yet that's exactly what we saw the hard Brexiteers in Parliament, of course, backed up by, again, Daniel Hannan, saying that, oh, now we've got to leave the single market. Even though after expressly saying in every single way, shape, or form that, of course, this just wasn't going to happen. And we have such bizarre disconnect, because if there is one person who really did lead the fantasy that was Brexit, it was Daniel Hannan. He was very much the chief cheerleader of the fantasy Brexit campaign, of this fantasy island that Brexit would indeed create. That's why he won the moniker of being the brain of Brexit. The idea, of course, being was that regardless of whatever question anyone ever had, the idea was, oh, well, I don't have the answer now, but I guarantee you, if you go talk to Mr. Hannan, he'll be able to answer that question for you. It was a great get out for many, of course, Brexiteers, and of course, gave Daniel Hannan plenty of time to come up with some new nonsense for him to sprout for the fantasy island that he was going to create. And remember, he is partly responsible for the situation we are now in, aka Brexit Britain. So let's get into the fancy world of Daniel Hannan. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So let's get into this. This comes from the Yorkshire Bylines with the title of Inside the Fancy Worlds of Daniel Hannan. Daniel Lord Hannan found himself ridiculed on social media recently after the video footage emerged of him before the referendum, describing in fantastic terms what this country would be like in 2025 if Britain voted for Brexit. His vision, just a mere 9 years on from the vote, appears to be a mixture of Shangri-La and El Dorado. And if you haven't seen the clip, well, there's more for that later. He also obviously writes a regular comment for the Washington Examiner, a very right-wing website and weekly magazine of the motto, restoring America, although God help them if they're relying on him to do that, where he demonstrates that his recollection of the past is no more reliable than his predictions for the future. They are both the fancy worlds to Lord Hannan of Kingsclere. Sorry. Yeah, that's how you say it. But of course, why Hannan stepped into the row of Northern Ireland recently, just, to spice things up a bit more. In his latest article on the 22nd of November, Hannan steps into the simmering row over the Northern Ireland Protocol in a piece which he defends Boris Johnson and slaps all the blame onto Brussels, saying a very vengeful EU is forcing a crisis in Northern Ireland. His portrayal of the EU 27 trying to take advantage and trying to extract the vengeance from a weakened UK sits rather uneasy with Lord Frost talking up Britain as a global superpower, confidently striding the world and looking Europe dead in the eye as a sovereign equal. His intentions, of course, come as the revelations that the US will continue to deteriorate, with many blaming the UK government's cavalier attitude to threats of triggering the Article 16. Joe Biden also believes that such a move could put at risk the Good Friday Agreement. And it's not just he believes, that is probably an absolute true fact. And of course, the Americans helped to broker the Good Friday Agreement. The Financial Times has also claimed that his administration is refusing to lift tariffs on the UK steel exports following pressure from Congress. Hannan admits that there is a smidgen of truth in suggesting that Johnson and Brexit are at fault, but he says it ignores the role that Brussels, which is, quote, quietly calculated, jeopardizing the stability in Northern Ireland so as to punish Britain for Brexit. It all seems like a bit of an effort to try and counter Ireland's highly diplomatic offensive on Capitol Hill. After the Brexit vote in 2016, Hannan claimed that the EU would discuss a trade deal for the UK unless London promised the goods in Northern Ireland would match EU standards. This was in fact the solution jointly agreed by also Johnson and Toshak Vladka, as one way of avoiding a hard land border when all other ideas had failed. Hannan still believes that some sort of mutual recognition would make the issue redundant, and draws an analogy with Canada and the USA. They too share a border, which would, I assume, be made much easier to manage with one of Hannan's proposed mutual recognition agreements. But they don't have one. Canada does have MRAs on a conformity assignments in some sectors, obviously with the EU and the EFTA, Switzerland, Australia, and the UK, but not the USA. And only one is recognizing certifying bodies in which is others in each other's territories. It does not mean that the EU recognizes Canada's statements or even vice versa. It would not reduce all border checks in any case. Following on from 2016, Hannan said that Britain and Ireland should begin to work on technical solutions that would render the border invisible. And of course, does anyone actually remember those talks? I don't. But in 2017, after a general election in which Britain returned a very anti-Brexit majority of MPs, then apparently encouraged Brussels to offer terms so harsh that Britain just might drop the whole idea of Brexit. And according to Hannan, in the first most shocking abuse of parliamentary procedure since the 17th century, those MPs paralysed the government, which simultaneously refused to allow a general election. Johnson had to agree to the EU's demands in order to end the break of the deadlock, while, as Lord Frost put it, the UK negotiating hand was tied. Some might refer to it as democracy at work. Of course, recently ennobled peer now adds that now Johnson has a majority, he could indeed tear the withdrawal agreement up. Yet, contrary to the impression given in most of the media, he has no intention of doing so. This impression given in most media is because Frost very publicly threats to do so pretty much every week, as he did last Friday, after a virtual meeting with the EU President Salvonik. Without a trace of irony, though, Hannan now says, I've been in politics long enough to know when a story has passed the point of correction. The idea of a populist and irresponsible Johnson versus the dull and bureaucratic EU is impossible to remove from one's heads, but facts are facts. And yes, facts are facts. What a pity he employs so few of them in his articles. So, of course, back in May 2016, just a few weeks before the referendum, Hannan's video appeared on the BBC Newsnight programme, which you can see below, apparently speaking from in 2025 for a view of his very own fantasy world. He also wrote an article on the 21st of June, 2 days before the polls opened, in a very similar vein for the Reaction Life website founded by Ian Martin, a Brexit economist who later admitted a question he most feared was, what EUs were we going to scrap after Brexit? And he still had no idea and still doesn't. Of him saying this below. It's June 24th, 2025, and Britain is marking its annual Independence Day celebration. As fireworks stream throughout the summer sky, it's still not quite dark, and we wonder why it took us so long to leave. The years that followed the 26th referendum didn't just reinvigorate our economy, our democracy, and our liberty. They improved regulation with our neighbours. The United Kingdom is now the region's foremost knowledge-based economy. We lead the world in biotech, law, education, audiovisual sector, financial services, and software. New industries from 3D printing to driverless cars have sprung up, and the country and older industries too have revived as energy prices have fallen back to global levels. Steel, cement, paper, plastics, ceramics producers have all become competitive again. Yeah, that is still a complete fantasy. It's hard to really know which is more ludicrous. The firework display, of course, in broad daylight, or a reinvigorated economy and improved relations with our neighbours, and Britain leading the world in 3D printing and driverless cars, which just, quote, sprung up out of nowhere. Or that the UK's energy-intensive industries have become competitive again due to lower energy costs. Some businesses have already had to shut down due to gas and electricity being triple the government's forecast. He also didn't foresee the downsides, not a one, which we are currently experiencing, and he certainly didn't predict the Irish border issue. In Annan's vision of the future, every section of the British economy suddenly started to boom the minute we left the EU. And by 2025, the UK had undergone a sort of modern day Wunderschwarzwunder, where we all keep we're all knee deep in money, dripping with a newfound prosperity and leering across the channel. And he once again shows how many Brexiteers genuinely believe that Britain was bogged down with unnecessary yet unidentified EU red tape that could be just slashed immediately. In contrast to this magical overnight transformation, another Brexit supporter, Ryan Baugh, chair of the Public Understanding of Economics at the Casto Institute, writes on the Conservative Home that it will take decades to determine if Brexit was a success or not. Of course, Hannan may yet be proved right. With only 3 years to go, it looks very highly optimistic, to say the least. It seems more likely that people in 2025 will be wondering where their next meal could be coming from. But of course, Daniel Hannan seems to have been born a Eurosceptic. He founded the Oxford Campaign for an Independent Britain in 1990 as a 19-year-old undergraduate and was the first director of the fledgling ERG, yes, that one, back in 1993. And unlike Ryan Bourne and the Cato Institute, he clearly wasn't prepared to wait decades to see if being a member of the EU would bring success. He started to agitate for Brexit barely at 17 years old after we joined, before the word was even invented. When Britain became a member of the EC on the 1st of January, Hannan was barely a year old, living on his parents' farm near Lima, Peru. He could have no idea what life was indeed like in global Britain was like at the time. He appears to never have done any of the gainful work at all, becoming an MP in 1999, aged 28, and he hasn't taken his hands out of the public purse since. At the moment, he's an advisor for the Department of International Trade, but appears to have no experience or even basic understanding of trade or commerce of any kind. You would have thought that this long period of silence would be inappropriate for someone who once said that COVID-19 isn't really going to kill you. It really isn't. But that's how Lord Hannan works. In fact, the more wrong he is, the more he is spurred on to new depths of error. He is forecasting what William McGonagall was to poetry. So, yeah, Hannan is one of those people who will periodically crawl out of the woodwork from time to time, and I fully expect Hannan to start, shall we say, doing some serious crawling pretty much soon, as most of the Brexiteers are. In fact, I'm fully expecting them to go on a "you didn't do Brexit right" campaign. Is one of the things I think that they might do maybe one day. Could be what relaunches Nigel Farage back into his political career, maybe even backed up by Daniel Hannan. Like I say, Daniel Hannan was the great fantasist of Brexit, but also portrayed very much by the Brexiteers as the brain of Brexit. But remember, always this word that he said was only a fool would ever leave the single market. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed my talk on the fool that is Daniel Hannan. And now, thank you very much for watching. Of course, as always, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, thank you very much for watching. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.